Gert Frober arrived day one on the set. "How do you do? I'm very happy to meet you." That was all right. Then I talked to him and I realized he didn't speak a word of English.
Goldfinger isn't just one of James Bond's greatest adventures. It hides surprising stories that most fans never noticed. Behind every unforgettable scene are risky decisions, shocking real-life events, and hidden details that completely change how you see the film. One famous moment was far more dangerous than it looked, while another mystery involving an iconic movie prop remains unsolved even today. From secret production choices to incredible behind-the-scenes twists, these cinema secrets reveal a side of Goldfinger that few people ever discover. So, which secret stands out above all the rest? A royal name rescue. The name Pussy Galore almost disappeared before Goldfinger reached theaters. American censors believed it was too suggestive for audiences in 1964 and wanted the character renamed Kitty Galore. Studio executives worried the original name might cause problems with the film's release. Producer Cubby Broccoli found a clever way to change their minds. He invited the lead censor and his wife to dinner, then showed them a British newspaper featuring Honor Blackman with Prince Philip. The headline proudly used the character's full name without any complaints. Broccoli kind of argued that if the British royal family accepted the name in a national newspaper, there really wasn't any reason American audiences couldn't take it too. His simple but effective reasoning convinced the censors to leave the character with her original name, basically. Even so, while the name stayed in the movie, some of the promotional materials still tried to dodge it. Honor Blackman seemed to enjoy messing with interviewers, saying "Pussy Galore" whenever she could, and that added even more buzz to one of the Bond series' most discussed characters. If you thought that was a close call, the next story takes an even wilder turn. The costly opening surprise. Goldfinger introduced a tradition that became a major part of every James Bond film. The exciting opening mission had almost nothing to do with the main story, giving audiences a thrilling adventure before the title sequence even began. The famous moment where Bond removes his wetsuit to reveal a spotless white tuxedo was inspired by a real World War II spy operation. Fleming often borrowed ideas from true intelligence missions, giving even his most dramatic scenes a connection to real history. Behind the cameras, it all got way more tangled because it wasn't just the script. The actor first selected for one of the villains ended up being arrested the day before filming, after he committed a legit burglary. And yeah, that mattered. The whole production then rushed, swapping him out right at the last minute, with stuntman Alf Joint instead. Later on, Joint actually got burned for real during the bathtub scene when hot steam curled around his leg. The crew assumed his sharp, awful reaction was only perfect performance, and they kept going, more or less, even though they were accidentally filming the genuine pain right there on screen. The name behind revenge. The name Goldfinger was not created by accident. Ian Fleming borrowed it from real architect Erno Goldfinger, a man whose modern buildings he strongly disliked. Fleming believed the architect was ruining parts of London by replacing older homes with plain concrete designs. Their disagreement became so personal that Fleming turned the surname into one of James Bond's greatest villains. The choice quickly caused trouble. Erno Goldfinger threatened legal action, claiming the character was a direct attack on him. Fleming even joked that he would rename the villain Goldprick if the lawsuit continued. In the end, the publisher settled the dispute by paying legal costs and agreeing to use the full name, Auric Goldfinger, to separate the fictional character from the real architect. By the time filming started, the legal fight had already ended. The movie still introduced the villain as Auric Goldfinger in formal moments, but most characters simply called him Goldfinger. The compromise kept the famous name while avoiding more legal problems. What began as a personal grudge became one of the most recognizable villain names in movie history. Few fans realized that the name came from a real person whose disagreement with Ian Fleming almost changed the story forever. Goldfinger's biggest controversy. Gert Frobe gave a memorable performance as Auric Goldfinger, but his real life created headlines after the film was released. A newspaper revealed that he had joined the Nazi Party as a teenager, leading Israel to ban the movie. The news spread quickly, and many believed the actor had supported the Nazi regime throughout the war. The full story was far different. Frobe had left the party years before World War II reached its worst point. During the war, he secretly helped hide a Jewish woman and her son from the Gestapo, risking his own safety to protect them. Those important facts had been left out of the original report. A survivor later stepped forward and, rather plainly, confirmed that Frobe had saved their lives. His testimony shifted public opinion, and Israeli officials lifted the ban only weeks later. In other words, instead of being remembered as a former Nazi, Frobe ended up being recognized for showing courage during one of history's darkest and most brutal times. Even so, though, a lot of fans kept seeing him as just the cold-hearted villain from Goldfinger. Frobe would often say people somehow forget that he was actually friendly and cheerful, and he really loved making others laugh, especially when cameras were off. The villain's hidden clues. Auric Goldfinger's love for gold went far beyond his plans to attack Fort Knox. The filmmakers quietly filled nearly every scene with reminders of his obsession. No matter where he appeared, Goldfinger always wore at least one gold or yellow piece of clothing, making his favorite metal part of his identity. Even when he disguised himself as a United States Army officer near the end of the film, he still carried a golden revolver. His luxury Rolls-Royce also carried the license plate AU1, a clever reference to Au, the scientific symbol for gold on the periodic table. His first name added another hidden clue. Auric comes from the Latin word for gold, giving his character an identity built around wealth and greed from the very beginning. These small details helped make him feel larger than life without needing extra dialogue. Most viewers focused on the action and never noticed these visual hints. Together, they showed how every part of Goldfinger's world reflected his obsession, making him one of the most carefully designed villains in the James Bond series. Bond's forgotten romance. Before Goldfinger, the Bond series had a different plan for James Bond's personal life. Sylvia Trench appeared in the first two films and was supposed to become Bond's regular love interest. The idea was to give him someone familiar, waiting between dangerous missions. Director Guy Hamilton disagreed with that direction. He believed Bond should begin every adventure with a fresh start, instead of carrying relationships from one story to the next. That change would make every new mission feel more exciting and every new Bond girl more memorable. So, because of that decision, Sylvia Trench sorta disappeared from the series after only 2 appearances. And, yeah, the whole thing moved on. This shift helped set up the Bond formula that audiences kinda came to look for, where Bond goes from one assignment to the next. No lingering romance kinda hanging around and slowing the story down. Hamilton also pushed Bond to become a tougher and more self-assured hero, the kind who leaned on ingenious tools, small gadgets, and fast thinking. That refreshed angle basically shaped not only Goldfinger, but almost every James Bond movie that followed right after. The scene turned dangerous. Harold Sakata, who played Oddjob, became famous for his silent strength, but one of his biggest moments nearly ended in disaster. During the scene where Oddjob is electrocuted, special effects accidentally set his hands on fire while he reached for his steel-rimmed hat. Even though the flames were real, Sakata refused to stop acting. He stayed in character and continued the struggle until director Guy Hamilton finally called for the scene to end. Hamilton later admitted he did not realize the actor was actually being burned because the sparks looked so convincing on camera. Sakata's dedication came from years as a professional wrestler and Olympic silver medalist. His natural toughness helped him finish the scene despite the pain. making the performance even more believable than audiences realized. The famous bowler hat was later sold at auction for thousands of pounds, but the real story behind the scene is Sakata's determination. His willingness to keep going through real injuries helped create one of Goldfinger's most unforgettable moments. Real danger on set. The famous laser scene is one of the most unforgettable moments in James Bond history. Bond is tied to a gold table while a beam slowly moves toward him. It looked like a clever special effect, but filming the scene was much more dangerous than most people realized. Real laser technology in 1964 was too difficult to see on camera, so the crew used another method. Special effects technician Burt Luxford hid beneath the table and cut through a prepared groove using a real acetylene torch. The flame was only inches away from Sean Connery as the metal heated up above him. Connery's worried expression was totally real, like not even a little bit staged. He knew the technician was working blind from underneath the table, and he had to stop at the exact right moment, right in the middle of the dialogue. The heat was so intense it pretty much melted parts of the table, so every second felt kinda dangerous. The glowing laser beam people remember from the finished movie was added later during post-production. Still, the sparks, the heat, and that constant tension were all genuinely happening. So in the end, one of cinema's most famous scenes became an unforgettable performance, driven by genuine fear. The toughest recording session. Shirley Bassey's powerful theme song became one of the greatest James Bond songs ever recorded, but recording it pushed her to the limit. During the session, the opening credits were projected onto a screen so she could match every note to the timing of the film. When she reached the final note, the credits lasted longer than expected. Instead of stopping, Bassey held the powerful note for about 7 seconds, giving everything she had to finish at exactly the right moment. She later revealed she loosened her clothing to take a deeper breath before attempting the final stretch. The effort almost caused her to pass out. Once the music stopped, she collapsed from exhaustion after holding the note for so long. Her unforgettable performance became one of the defining sounds of the Bond series. The recording session also included future Led Zeppelin members Jimmy Page on guitar and John Paul Jones on bass. Long before becoming rock legends, they quietly helped create one of the most iconic movie theme songs ever recorded, A Parking Problem Solved. One of the Aston Martin DB5's smartest gadgets was inspired by something surprisingly ordinary. Director Guy Hamilton had become frustrated after receiving repeated parking tickets in London. Instead of simply complaining, he imagined a solution worthy of James Bond. That simple annoyance led to the idea of revolving license plates. At the press of a button, Bond's car could instantly change its identity and avoid unwanted attention. The clever feature quickly became one of the DB5's most famous gadgets. Building the car wasn't exactly easy, like not at all. Aston Martin executives were worried they might end up cutting into their valuable prototype, especially since special effects supervisor John Steers had to remove a section of the roof just to install the ejector seat. A lot of the so-called gadgets also depended on compressed air, because the electronics back then were pretty limited in the early 1960s. Once it was all done, the finished car ended up being one of the greatest movie vehicles ever created. Those gadgets helped turn the DB5 into a worldwide icon, and they boosted Aston Martin's popularity long after Goldfinger had left theaters. The voice behind Goldfinger. Gert Frobe looked perfect as Auric Goldfinger, but audiences rarely heard his real voice. Before filming began, his agent claimed he spoke English well enough for the role. Once production started, however, the crew discovered he knew only a few simple phrases. His heavy accent made many of his lines difficult to understand. Sean Connery even used Frobe's mouth movements as cues because following the spoken dialogue became challenging during scenes together. The filmmakers solved the problem after filming ended. British stage actor Michael Collins carefully dubbed almost all of Goldfinger's dialogue, matching Frobe's performance so naturally that most audiences never noticed the change. For German audiences, Frobe later dubbed his own voice back into the movie. The careful work behind the scenes allowed his unforgettable performance to remain believable while giving the villain the clear, confident voice fans still remember today. A vault built from imagination. The massive Fort Knox vault shown in Goldfinger never existed. The production team was refused permission to film inside the real gold depository because of its extreme security. Instead, production designer Ken Adam had to imagine what the famous vault might look like. Instead of building a believable underground storage place, Adam went and put together this huge, almost unreal room packed with enormous stacks of gold bars sitting behind massive steel gates. It was kind of a showy set, and it felt much more exciting than some regular warehouse. It also fit the movie's larger-than-life vibe pretty well. Once they finished it, the whole thing looked so convincing that the guards had to keep an eye on the gold-painted props, because visitors were sure they were real gold bars. Even the entrance to Fort Knox had to be recreated from scratch on the Pinewood Studios backlot, and that detail mattered more than you might think. After the film came out, the people in charge at the real Fort Knox actually praised Adam's imagination. His make-believe plan got so well known that, even today, a lot of people still end up picturing his version whenever they talk about the world's safest gold vault or thing like that. That wasn't the only thing that stood out behind the scenes. The next one raised the bar: Bond's toughest leading lady. Honor Blackman brought something different to the role of Pussy Galore. Before joining Goldfinger, she had already become famous for playing the skilled and confident Kathy Gale in the television series The Avengers. Her experience in martial arts made her stand out from other actresses of the time. Instead of relying on stunt doubles, Blackman performed many of her own fight scenes. Because she already knew judo, the filmmakers rewrote parts of the script so Pussy Galore would also be trained in the martial art. This made her one of Bond's toughest opponents before eventually becoming his ally. Her intense barn fight with Sean Connery looked convincing because both actors fully committed to the action. Connery even walked away with bruises after filming, showing just how physical the scene became. Blackman later joked that filming on soft hay was much easier than fighting on hard television studio floors. At 39 years old, she also became one of the oldest actresses to play a leading Bond girl. Her confidence, skill, and strong screen presence helped make Pussy Galore one of the franchise's most unforgettable female characters. Connery's career turning point. Filming Goldfinger took a physical toll on Sean Connery, especially during the final fight inside Fort Knox. While rehearsing with Harold Sakata, the former professional wrestler accidentally slammed Connery harder than expected, causing a serious back injury. The injury delayed production and added to Connery's growing frustration. By this point, James Bond had made him a worldwide star, but the demanding schedule left little time for other acting opportunities. He began questioning whether the role was worth the constant pressure. Connery used the setback to negotiate a much better contract before coming back for later Bond films. The producers eventually said yes to paying him a share of the movie's profits, so he became among the highest-paid actors of his period. Even if the fresh deal sort of matched his success, the physical pressure never really went away. Connery later admitted that the long work days and risky stunts made that glamorous James Bond image feel way different from the tiring reality hiding behind the scenes. The house guest who heard history first. Long before Michael Caine became an international movie star, he was staying in the London home of composer John Barry. Caine had temporarily moved in after leaving his apartment, giving him a front-row seat to one of cinema's greatest musical moments. Barry spent a long night finishing Goldfinger's powerful orchestral score while racing against a strict deadline. Surrounded by brass instruments, he worked until morning, shaping the bold sound that would become closely linked with James Bond. When breakfast arrived, Barry played the completed music for Caine before anyone else had heard it. That made the future Oscar-winning actor the very first listener to one of the most famous movie scores ever written. The music helped define the Bond series for decades. Barry created much of it while receiving constant editing changes from the film's cutting room, proving that even under enormous pressure, unforgettable movie history could still be made. The illegal movie shoot. The huge military attack on Fort Knox looked massive because the filmmakers used real American soldiers instead of extras. Troops stationed near the base agreed to take part, giving the scenes an authentic scale that would have been difficult to recreate otherwise. Director Guy Hamilton directed many of the soldiers from a helicopter using whistle signals. One whistle told them to look toward the aircraft, while another told them to collapse as if they had been knocked unconscious by the gas attack. Military officials got unhappy when the filming helicopters flew way lower than the safety rules were supposed to allow. Hamilton wanted those dramatic camera angles, even if the flights were already breaking normal operating limits around the bay, too. The production also pushed the budget further by shuffling the same group of soldiers into different spots between takes, so it looked like thousands were actually involved. Bond's hidden tire trick. One of Goldfinger's most exciting car chases featured Bond's Aston Martin slicing through the tires of a Ford Mustang. It looked like the stunt happened on a real road, but the filmmakers used a much safer method behind the scenes. Instead of damaging expensive cars, the crew built special fiberglass copies of the vehicles and mounted them on a rail system inside the studio. This allowed them to repeat the tire slashing effect several times without destroying the original cars. The clever setup also protected the limited number of Mustangs available during filming. The idea behind the hidden tire cutters didn't really come from modern technology. Honestly, it was more like it was nudged into existence by the bladed wheels used on ancient chariots, especially the ones you can still notice in the classic film Ben-Hur. Then, mixing history with creative engineering, the filmmakers somehow managed to turn an older kind of weapon into what ended up being one of Bond's smartest gadgets. Ford was so happy with how the Mustang looked that it provided yet another vehicle for that well-known car crusher moment. And it wasn't just the car that made noise, because even the crushing sounds were crafted later, using crumpled beer cans. That small detail helped the film, in the end, snag the Bond series' first Academy Award. Operation Grand Slam explained. Operation Grand Slam sounds like a name created for James Bond, but it had real Cold War roots. The CIA had used it for U-2 spy plane missions over the Soviet Union. Ian Fleming often borrowed real military terms to make his stories sound more believable. However, the movie changed Goldfinger's original plan. In the novel, he wanted to steal the gold from Fort Knox. The filmmakers realized moving thousands of tons of gold would require hundreds of trucks and many days, making the robbery nearly impossible. Instead, Goldfinger planned to contaminate the gold with a dirty bomb and damage the world economy. This made the plot more believable while keeping the real-life code name Operation Grand Slam. The movie everyone wanted. When Goldfinger opened in 1964, it became much more than another successful movie. Crowds were so large that some theaters in New York stayed open 24 hours a day, just to keep up with demand. The excitement marked the beginning of what became known as Bond Mania. The film somehow paid back its whole production budget within just 2 weeks, like it was nothing. It then turned into the fastest-grossing movie of its era, and later even ended up in the Guinness Book of World Records, mainly because the box office results were so remarkable. Premieres, well, those drew gigantic crowds just about everywhere the movie showed up. Fans crammed into theaters, photographers crowded the streets, and Sean Connery had a hard time getting anywhere at public events without being surrounded. The buzz became so intense that he stopped attending a lot of premieres altogether. Goldfinger changed James Bond from a popular British secret agent into a global cultural icon. That success, it did a lot more than people expected. It shifted the future of the franchise and basically confirmed that audiences really wanted bigger adventures, bigger contraptions, and villains you won't forget. The famous toy error. Goldfinger inspired one of the most successful movie toys ever made, but it began with a surprising mistake. When Corgi Toys created its first Aston Martin DB5 model, the company painted the car gold instead of the silver color seen in the film. The designers believed silver looked too much like plain metal, while gold better matched the movie's title and looked more attractive on store shelves. Even though the toy was inaccurate, children loved it, and it quickly became a huge bestseller. Silver versions did not appear until 2 years later, but by then, the gold model had already become a collector's favorite. The unexpected mistake ended up fitting perfectly with Goldfinger's obsession with gold, making the toy even more memorable. The success of the model started a long partnership between James Bond and Corgi Toys. Special editions continued for decades, proving that one simple production error created one of the most famous toy cars ever sold. The hidden filming location. Goldfinger may look like it was filmed in sunny Miami, but Sean Connery never shot his Florida scenes there. Most scenes at the famous Fontainebleau Hotel were created on sound stages at Pinewood Studios in England. The crew used detailed sets, bright studio lights, rear projection, and clever camera angles to copy the look of Miami. These tricks made it seem like Bond was relaxing beside a real Florida pool. Only C.C. Linder, who played Felix Leiter, traveled to Florida for location filming. Connery stayed in England because he was also working on another movie. The illusion worked so well that most viewers never noticed. One of Goldfinger's most memorable American locations was actually filmed thousands of miles away inside a British studio. A last-minute masterstroke. Goldfinger's thrilling finale almost ended very differently. During the original filming, the countdown on the dirty bomb was supposed to stop with only 3 seconds remaining. It was an exciting ending, but producer Harry Saltzman believed one small change could make it even better. While reviewing the finished film, Saltzman suggested changing the countdown so the timer would stop at exactly 007 seconds. The number immediately reminded audiences of James Bond's famous code name and added a clever touch of humor to the tense climax. The adjustment happened during post-production, meaning no expensive reshoots were needed. It was a tiny change that lasted only a moment, yet it became one of the film's most memorable details because it perfectly fit Bond's identity. That simple decision showed how even the smallest ideas can leave a lasting impression. More than 60 years later, the famous 007 countdown remains one of the clever finishing touches that helped make Goldfinger a timeless classic. The missing $1 million Aston. The famous Aston Martin DB5 from Goldfinger became just as legendary as the movie itself. Decades later, the original gadget-filled prototype disappeared from a secure hangar at Boca Raton Airport in Florida. The theft shocked collectors because the building showed signs of forced entry, yet no tire tracks were leading away. Some investigators thought the thieves might have lifted the car out by aircraft rather than driving it away. And honestly, that idea seemed a little wild. But it came up because of the airport's uncontrolled airspace and the total lack of proof about how the vehicle actually left the property. Originally bought for about $250,000 in the 1980s, the missing DB5 is now thought to be worth well over $25 million. Reports from art recovery experts say it may still be sitting somewhere inside a private collection, in the Middle East of all places. Even with years of searching, the whole mystery has never been fully resolved. The car is still considered one of the most valuable missing movie props in history. Kind of like it keeps stacking up more legend on top of Goldfinger's already unforgettable legacy. Keep that mystery in mind, because the last one fooled audiences around the world. Hollywood's biggest gold myth. One of Goldfinger's most famous images shows Jill Masterson covered from head to toe in gold paint. Over the years, many people believed actress Shirley Eaton died because her skin could no longer breathe. The story became one of Hollywood's biggest movie myths. In reality, people breathe through their lungs, not through their skin. Even so, the filmmakers took safety seriously. A doctor stayed on set during filming, and a small area on Eaton's stomach was left free of paint to help her body release heat. That spot was carefully hidden from the camera. A lot of fans also said that Eaton was somehow in the famed opening credits, but it was actress Margaret Nolan who, with a gold-painted body, let the projected images show up during the title sequence. She spent weeks filming those artistic little weird shots. The mix-up has stuck around for decades, mostly because both actresses ended up tied together with the film's shiny golden look. In a way, they sort of co-authored one of the most recognizable images ever seen in movie history. Goldfinger became a classic for more than its action and unforgettable characters. Behind every famous scene are hidden stories, clever ideas, and surprising moments that make the film even more remarkable. Which secret surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss our next deep dive into movie history. And be sure to watch the next video shown on your screen for even more incredible cinema secrets.